The year was 2005 and the coaster wars were reaching new heights. Get it? 2 years prior, the world's tallest and fastest roller coaster, Top Thrill Dragster, opened at Cedar Point in Ohio. I was 23 and I lived in New Jersey. And in New Jersey, we're all super petty. Even my home park, Six Flags Great Adventure, had that petty in them. Just 24 months after Top Thrill Dragster debuted, Great Adventure took the world's tallest and fastest coaster crown away from it by just 36 feet and 8 miles per hour with the launch of the king of all coasters, Kingda Ka. Now, almost 20 years later, Great Adventure and Cedar Point are in-laws. A reimagined Top Thrill Dragster still stands, but for long? Who knows? And the one-time tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world, Kingda Ka, has been unceremoniously retired, with no fanfare, no prior announcement, and no chill. As we all reflect on this monumental moment in coaster history, I'd like to take you through my personal journey with the ride and consider what it all meant and what it all means moving forward. This is my ode to a legend. Arms down, head back, hold on. I rode my very first roller coaster a little over 25 years ago on my first teenage visit to Great Adventure. It was called Batman and Robin, the Chiller, a launch coaster that went up to a dead end and rolled backwards on the track to return to the launch station. I was terrified, but my friend Perry bullied me onto it. I still get a sinking feeling watching videos of this ride because I still don't trust the physics that dictate something like that won't completely fly off the track. But I'm also an idiot. To my knowledge, this is not something that has ever happened or is capable of happening. In any case, it was a rough ride. You were instructed to take your earrings out so you didn't hurt yourself as your head smashed against the restraints. But that feeling, the rush of the launch, was something I had never felt before. And just like that, I was hooked on coasters. Being a kid from Jersey, Great Adventure was where I spent the majority of my park days for over a decade. I took one-off trips with my high school marching band to Orlando and California and Virginia, and eventually took summer trips to Hershey Park in Pennsylvania, but I spent countless days poring over every single square inch of Great Adventure. I started to feel that sense of ownership one does when they spend a lot of time at a park. It was during that time I started to become more aware of the so-called coaster wars. When I learned about Cedar Point's existence, I was like mad about it. Other enthusiasts would be all like, Cedar Point's the best, Great Adventure is trash, and I would start getting into real-life arguments to defend it. When Cedar Point took the crown for the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world, I was legitimately annoyed by it. My coaster experience had become much broader by then, and as much as I enjoyed that Great Adventure's existing offerings continued to up the ante of what I had accessible, I wanted my park to have that record. So of course I was elated when Kingda Ka arrived. You can have your Top Thrill Dragster. We got the tallest and fastest, baby. Even though they're essentially the same sort of thing, in my estimation, Kingda Ka was of course better, because it was mine. As you would expect, Kingda Ka opened to much fanfare. At the time, I remember hearing that Kingda Ka was the tallest coaster that the designers would ever build, because anything taller than that wasn't safe. I can't verify the truth of that statement, but like many urban legends, it was just believable enough. Kingda Ka was based on a make-believe tiger. Sure, it actually was a pretty solid attempt by Great Adventure to evolve from just amusement park to full-on theme park, as the whole area around the ride was in support of this tiger theme. For a little while, they actually had live tigers in a pen with a show and everything just chilling in the park, but that got canned when the trainers went rogue and tried to mate the tigers. Only in Jersey, folks. That opening season was tough. The ride was riddled with downtime. My first experience on it, I got in line at 3 p.m. and didn't get off the ride until 9 p.m. One of the ride ops said it was because people kept leaning on the air gates, which would shut the whole thing down and require a reboot, and that the coaster was designed to be too safe, but folks like El Toro Ryan, who actually know what they're talking about, will probably know more about that than me. Me and my girlfriend at the time went to the park that day with the intention of shooting some pictures of me to use as acting headshots. I know, I deserve whatever scorn you're feeling from that statement. So I donned my nicest button-down shirt and off we went. Of course, we didn't realize we'd be spending the majority of the day in the queue. The wild thing though is that it was still kind of a fun experience. There was a DJ there and the excitement was at a fever pitch, even with the excruciating wait to get on. I think I heard Shakira's Hips Don't Lie like 30 times in line that day. But when it was time to get on, I got that feeling in my stomach again. That sinking feeling of fear. The same exact one I felt before boarding the chiller all those years ago, and one I really hadn't felt since. I had been in a whole bunch of coasters by that point, but was I afraid again? We finally got onto the train. As we rolled out of the station and rounded the corner, my heart was pounding. It had been dark out for quite a while, but that track was lit. We had heard all these stories about the ride while we were waiting. Of rollbacks, of gasping for breath, of people's contacts literally flying out of their eyeballs from the intensity of the launch. And now, it was time. Arms down, head back, hold on. The train recoiled slightly. It was the longest 3 seconds of my life. And just as complete panic was about to set in, we were gone. When we got off the ride, even after a 6-hour wait, the first thing I remember saying was, "So worth it." I don't scream on roller coasters, but my natural reaction was to scream on this one, and 2 seconds in, sound just stopped coming out. I'm not kidding when I say that my entire body tingled for like 2 hours after getting off of it. The ride experience itself isn't a long one, but each part of it feels like a separate journey. It starts with the otherworldly launch, the part right after the launch where your body finally adjusts to the speed on the straightaway, the ascent up the top hat with the mystery of what's to come, those brief few seconds at the top, a moment you wish you could bottle, the open air, the views, but what I remember most, those few seconds of stillness and quiet in spite of all the commotion down below, the spinning descent downward that felt like a free fall, and the finale, a relaxing ride back into the station with the satisfaction that you've conquered the king. Kingda Ka wasn't just a roller coaster. It was a completely new feeling that was impossible for a regular person to recreate almost anywhere else. But in spite of all that, I didn't want to go on again. Hardcore coaster enthusiasts have a lot of different criteria for how they rank their favorites. The G-force, the airtime, that kind of stuff. I'm not nearly knowledgeable enough to call myself a hardcore coaster head, but I enjoy them thoroughly and have ridden a whole bunch. For me, one of the biggest factors in ranking a personal favorite is its re-rideability. The launch in Kingda Ka was the most intense experience I've ever felt on a ride, but while I found it exhilarating, it was definitely a sometimes food. In the years that followed, Kingda Ka wasn't always a must-do for me. It was fun to ride with people who had never experienced it, but I had to be in a certain kind of mood to get on it. I much preferred Nitro, which doesn't have inversions or anything and does have some intense moments, but after so many re-rides, it more so just makes me feel like I'm flying. Kind of a side note, but for my money, one of the most beautiful views I've seen in my life is on Nitro at the golden hour, right as the sun is about to set. But yeah, Kingda Ka all but marked the end of the coaster wars, because the thing about bigger and taller and faster coasters apparently is that they are incredibly expensive to maintain. And to get back to my previous point, the sentiment around these behemoths was also changing. Six Flags Great Adventure, along with some of the other Six Flags parks, went heavy on thrills but didn't offer a lot for families. There was an opportunity to save some cash while broadening the appeal of the park at large. Even though Great Adventure opened another record-breaking wooden coaster, El Toro, the following year, the days of spending big bucks was over for the time being. As I've gotten older, my personal preferences have continued to evolve in what I want out of a roller coaster. The rides that are super intense or nerve-wracking just to look at, like that big swing thing that just feels like Final Destination waiting to happen, it's just not what I'm usually looking for. Since Kingda Ka arrived on the scene, a lot of other coasters have opened that don't necessarily break any records, but they're more complete rides that, for a general audience, rank high on the re-rideability scale. Now, am I suggesting that Slinky Dog Dash or that Hagrid thing in Universal are better rides than Kingda Ka? I mean, kinda? Yeah, I know it's not apples to apples, and I'm certainly not getting the same G-force or air on those rides, but I'm smiling the whole time I'm on them and would get right back on in a second. And that's something that was never true for me about Kingda Ka. Don't get me wrong, coasters like Kingda Ka definitely have their place, especially for the coaster diehards. But in building a balanced experience from a park's point of view, stacking your real estate with multiple monsters like that which continue to break records just isn't good business, especially if it means the investment in the other, maybe more passive parts of the park have to suffer. It was incredibly exciting to be in my teens and early 20s and get treated to banger after banger coaster just 90 minutes away from my house. I got the fortune of being able to ride Kingda Ka many times and spent hours upon hours of my life in that queue. Heck, it was in that line where my wife and I spent a good long while coming up with the idea for our wedding cake. To be fully transparent, we had probably just ridden the Dark Knight coaster, but that trash heap is another story for another day. In my opinion, the Dark Knight coaster is a perfect example of a colossal failure at trying to diversify a park's portfolio with the worst possible addition. But as enjoyable as the coaster wars were, as always, times they are a-changin'. With Kingda Ka officially biting the dust, the current forerunner and the rumored replacements for it is some spinning coaster with a tower thing that was mentioned in a survey a while back. Something like that might not be breaking any records in the way Kingda Ka did, but can a potentially long, fun, family ride work as a suitable replacement for it? It may not have the swagger, and people might not be traveling from all over to ride it, but does it do a better job at enhancing the average guest's experience? I know the obvious answer is why not both, but if we're being realistic about it, I think Kingda Ka's removal will ultimately be a win for the future success of a park I love and really want to see succeed. I don't know, maybe my age is skewing my perspective on this. I mean, back in the 80s, having giraffes in the safari next door steal a Snickers bar out of your hand by reaching into your car and biting it was a wild experience too, but now that I'm older, I think we're all better off that's not something that happens anymore. Whatever it is that comes next, I'm pouring one out for Kingda Ka. It was an icon, a marvel of technology, and something coaster enthusiasts from literally around the world came to Jackson, New Jersey to specifically enjoy. That's a pretty remarkable feat for my old home park. But it's also something I'm okay with passing the record-setting torch on if it means gaining something that even more people can enjoy together. Unless Cedar Point gets the record back with a new ride. Then I'm boycotting it even if my new All Parks Gold Pass does get me in. After all, I'm Jersey, and we petty as all get out, baby.